Okay, good afternoon. We're here with Chris Wade from the British School of the Netherlands, or British School Netherlands, should I say. And we're here just to share his experience of their school returning to PE. So Chris, over to you, please. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and your school.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Wade. Been teaching for 20 years this year, 5 years in the UK in Hertfordshire. Then moved and did 6 years in Saudi Arabia in a school called Durham British Grammar School, which is in the Eastern Province, close to Bahrain. From there, after 6 years there, moved to Qatar, where I changed from a British curriculum, which I've been teaching for about 11 years, and then moved to MYP, an IB diploma, where I was teaching the IB diploma Sport, Exercise, Health, Science, as well as MYP, and then became an IB curriculum reviewer for that, and then moved back into the British system. And I decided to move away from the Middle East, come back a bit closer to home when I came to the British School in the Netherlands. And we currently have it's a British curriculum, Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5 with A-level. But in addition to that, we do IB Diploma as well, and the IB Careers Programme, which has BTEC involved with it too. Not BTEC Sport as yet, but we're looking at involving that, doing that very soon. So that's kind of the context of where I am right now. Work just outside of The Hague. So we're about 1,200 students in our senior school, about 2,500 students across all campuses. And I'm the head of PE for the senior school, Voorschoten, the larger senior school campus.
Great. So a great deal of experience, different curriculums, different countries. Yeah, thank you for being here. And let's hope your insights can help others.
Hope so.
So we understand your school and the context of where you are. So first of all, really, could you paint a picture for us of what a day at your school looks like as children arrive, as staff arrive, as the structure of the day changed? What's it like before we get to PE, just school in general?
Well, I'm sure this is going to be adjusted for depending on your situation, which country you're in, and obviously what laws and things that they put into place. For the Netherlands, basically, the Prime Minister had indicated that he would allow for senior schools, and initially for primary schools as well, approximately 50% of classes to come back in at any one time. So just to reduce numbers in classes. And that was really addressed to Dutch schools, but then obviously international schools following those procedures as well. So basically what it means is that as a senior school, we've divided the school into alpha and beta groups. So we have 50% coming in on one day, and then the other 50% coming in on the day after. Now we've got a 2-week timetable. So that makes it a little bit more awkward in that we've got on a week A, we have alpha group coming in on Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday. And then what the SLT have put a lot of hard work and thought into it. They've repeated the week A, so then the beta come in on a Monday and a Wednesday and a Friday, and it changes as a double week A, and it changes to a double week B, approximately for about the last 6 weeks of the year. It's a reduced day, so instead of 1 hour lessons, it's now 45-minute lessons, and a much reduced lunchtime as well, only half an hour. Students, when they arrive and they line up at different sections of the school. So some emergency exits are now main entrances for some students for certain year groups. With still 550 students walking around the building, it's still quite a significant number. So there's one-way systems. We've got 3 floors. There's one-way systems, and there's dedicated stairwells as well to each year group. The way Key Stage 3 works is that Key Stage 3 classes remain in one room, apart from very, very specialist lessons, food technology, design technology, for example. So they can move around, and the PE lessons, of course. But apart from that, they're in one room. So it can get a little bit tedious, I reckon, for them. Again, 50% class sat in one room. Windows wide open to allow fresh air to come into the room and stuff as well. In some ways, we're quite fortunate, as a lot of international schools will be, in that we have Surface Pros. We are a Microsoft school, and we use Canvas as our VLE as well. So a lot of work has been put on there, Microsoft Teams, etc. So some stuff is still going on live. So some are at home and watching on Microsoft Teams, while the others are inside and getting lessons taught by teachers. So that's Key Stage 3. Key Stage 4, a little bit different, of course. No 11s in at the moment, but Year 10 are back in, and they can move in and around school, obviously because of options and choices for GCSEs. And the Year 12 similar for the IB and also for the A level. So they're allowed to move freely around, obviously keeping 1.5 meter distance throughout. Entrances, exits all have automatic hand sanitizers for people to use every time they come in and they go out as well. But yeah, I think that's a pretty detailed picture.
Yeah, great. So that's interesting that you've said a shorter day, because the other schools I've spoken to, particularly in Asia, have extended their day and they've extended lunchtime to spread students out more, you know, and to encourage them to go at the first 15 minutes of lunch, and then another group comes in the middle, and then another group. Yeah. So what's the idea about reducing the day and reducing the lessons? Why has that happened? Oh, sorry, I've accidentally muted you rather than myself, Chris. I apologize.
No problem. Have you got me back? Okay. I think twofold. One, because we have students coming from all over the Netherlands, really. Well, within a certain distance, of course. But we have them coming from Amsterdam, coming from The Hague. So it's not that they're coming just from a local community. And because of that, there's been bigger concerns about people coming from different gemeentes of different regions and bringing and coming on public transport, and therefore the chances of bringing viruses or getting viruses on the way on public transport, etc. So what they've done is we've got Year 7 coming in, Key Stage 3 coming in at a normal time, but they're finishing slightly earlier. But then our Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 students are finishing starting an hour later. So they're coming in at a different time, avoiding a doubling up on public transport as well. And then they continue. So their first period has been added to the end of the day. So their period 1 becomes their period 6. And so they stay on for an extra hour afterwards. So their Key Stage 3 head off, and obviously they can disseminate across and make it lower numbers leaving the school and leaving the area, and then Key Stage 4 and 5 do that later on. So I think that's part of the thinking.
That makes sense. So let's talk about PE. So I mean, you might know better where to start, but me as a head of department, I'm thinking, you know, how do they arrive to PE, and you know, what does the start of the lesson look like, and then basically, what are you teaching? What does PE look like in your school at the moment?
I'll start with what we kind of decided to do, I suppose. And I think it's really key to rely on the creativity of your own teams and collaborate within your teams. So the first thing that we started to look at really was, well, what was the new timetable going to look like? What can we do within that time? And it was decided quite early on that students will come in their PE kit. Lessons were reduced from an hour to 45 minutes. They can't be in changing rooms, even with the 50%. We were very limited as well with, we tried to follow the KVLO, which is, I believe it's like a Dutch PE teacher union, gives advice to PE teachers and rules and regulations kind of advice. So we were looking at that, and that was advised that there's no PE teaching to be happening indoors as well. So that was a bit of a sort of killer on your options and things that you can do, especially in the Netherlands, because we get plenty of rain as well. So that was one of the pieces of advice we had to really bear in mind when we were deciding what to do. Then we were looking at things like we've got to remain 1.5 meters. Then we're looking at not touching the same pieces of equipment from student to student or from teacher to student. And so what I did is I was looking around for some advice, and a good friend of mine who is a curriculum advisor for Cambridge, his name's Ian Roberts, English Schools athletics team manager as well in the UK. His Twitter handle was at Coach to the Stars. He put out for Cambridge, he put out sort of some best practice. And so I grabbed that best practice, looked at it, thought it was applicable to us. And then I put it on a document And I said to my team, sent that document out on a Word document, but you could do it on a Google Doc, just a shared doc. And it was, what do we think within the limitations of what we have, within the limitations of the KVLO, let's brainstorm and just come up with some ideas of the things that we could operate and do. And then once you've come up with an idea, what are the rules within the Netherlands on how we can operate that sport? So the different bonds or the different kind of associations for hockey, for tennis, for basketball, whatever it is, came out with their own national recommendations. So then we tried to use those as well to inform how and what we could teach. What we then did is we then came up with some options for Key Stage 3. We realized with the alpha and the beta, the shortened lessons, that we couldn't really keep to curriculum as well. And then we were thinking within the community, like, what have the students really missed out on? They've missed out on activity time. They've missed out on steps and just general physical activity, no matter what we tried to do at home with them. But in addition to that, the biggest thing and the issue that we really found is that because, especially for Key Stage 3, because they're going to be in one room with one class, not talking to anyone else but the teachers, how can we fit what we're going to do, the activities that we fit with them that will work for well-being and social and mental well-being? So we thought, what can we fit in within that time? We then decided on 4 things, really, 4 kind of options. And we don't normally do options in Key Stage 3, but you have your sort of set curriculum programs. And we decided on a few things. We decided on introducing a new element of curriculum, which we put online as well, but that was jump rope, because we figured that was quite an easy one, that you can clean down equipment. They have one jump rope. We can clean individual pieces of equipment and return it quite easily. You can work 1.5, 2 meters away from different people. It's a new skill. It's kind of fitness based, and then we learn different jump rope skills in themselves. You could also then turn it into a creative unit as well, where people can then put together routines and lots of different levels, intermediate levels, beginner levels, advanced levels. They can be as creative as they want. So that was kind of one element. We then decided to do something about target games, which could change week on week. So looking at football, golf, keep ups, kind of small challenges that groups could then, as pairs, 1 ball each, could then decide to go through and sort of compete against the other people in their group, and who's the winner. And then you can take those numbers and you can extrapolate to year 8, to year 9, etc. So it's kind of like those people are involved with ball games, but again, they have 1 ball for themselves. We then did fitness. So fitness outside, and it could be a boot camp style fitness or Pilates or yoga or small challenges, again, that we're trying to compete with different people in the class. And then our kind of unique one, which was first brought up, and you kind of think, oh, really? But the mental social well-being aspect of it made sense, was walking, which was kind of interesting. And we were thinking, well, why? Well, first of all, the Key Stage 3s especially are only going to be in one room. They're not going to be able to socialize with any other groups. Secondly, their steps have gone down hugely within the period of time that we've been at home. And then thirdly, we added a challenge element to it as well, was, can we in a lesson cover 8,848 meters in Everest? Like cycling is big on Everesting. So can we do a half marathon within a certain number of lessons? Can we do full marathons? Can we do 100,000 steps and add them up then per form, per year group, for the school? How far can we walk? So that was kind of the Key Stage 3 elements we came up with. When it comes to Key Stage 4, we offered some others, things like tennis, because of the handling of the tennis balls and how we get the tennis balls up. Are they more likely to be able to abide by those rules? And therefore be safer. So we started adding other options in like that. I know I'm talking a lot. I can continue. When it comes to getting the students and what a start of a lesson looks like, with Key Stage 3, because they're in their room and we want to maintain distancing, and we have this one-way system, it was decided that PE teachers would go up to the classrooms and collect the classes. So we would go up to the floor, tell them to bring their bags and Surface Pros down at the same time. The reason for that was because if we had a wet weather lesson, we're going to go into the sports hall, and in the sports hall, because it's big enough, we can have 4 classes in there. We put cones and mats down 1.5 meters away from each other. And because we can't do physical activity indoors, so wet weather lessons are useless, we would then go onto Canvas and we'd do our other sort of wet weather lessons that we had, designing a kit, officiating, rules of ultimate frisbee, these sort of new activities, those kind of things that we had prepared on our VLE as well. So bring those bags down, space them out 1.5 meters around the AstroTurf pitch that we have. And then we had them organized. Each teacher would have them organized into forms with cones already set out. And the cones have stayed there all 2 weeks, 3 weeks that we've been in. And the students would sit by the cones. Again, we'd say, please don't touch the cones, because other students then might touch the cones, etc. And from then on, we gave them the speech, you know, how are we going to, the protocols, what we're going to do in PE, why it's important. So the same rules, information from the nurse. So, you know, if you're ill or you're injured, we want emails. We don't want notes themselves, of course. If you are injured, if you're ill, sorry, and by that we don't mean coronavirus symptoms, at which point you shouldn't be here, etc. And we give them the speech. And then we offer them the 4 options, and we'll rotate sort of every 2 weeks. They get a couple of lessons on each one. And then we just form by form, we get them up, distance them across to the other side. There's a whole new set of cones organized in their options. And then the first lesson was kind of doing that and the speeches. And then we did some kind of fitness on the spot with them at that point. And then second lesson came through, we'd organize them into their options. They come sit down, and then we'd collect them and take them off distance into the areas. And then each individual teacher is at the moment is staying on one of the activities. And the reason for that, I know it could possibly get a bit boring, but just understanding the protocols for each one of the activities, how to set up the equipment, we figured was just the safest way to do it. Other teachers coming in and not understanding the protocols, flicking from one activity to another. So we've tried to keep all teachers on the same activities.
That sounds to me, I mean, in difficult circumstances, you know, you mentioned creativity and collaboration at the beginning. PE teachers are, you know, renowned for thinking on their feet, solving problems, you know, just give us the kids and we'll make it work. You mentioned equipment. I know some departments and schools will try and come up with activities not using equipment, but there are ways we can do it with minimal equipment. Like you've said, that great idea with the skipping rope, the jump rope, something new, something interesting. And I think that's quite fun to teach. You know, like I'm not doing my football lesson, but this could be great.
That's right.
And really important there, just to summarize, you know, talking about the well-being and the social and mental side of it, that is something that is going to be massive. And PE departments are going to be front and center, I suppose, as a school to do that, because everyone else, like you said, they're going to be in exam style seating in classrooms, you know, and not allowed to interact in that way potentially. And then the walking, I just imagine, you know, a nightmare scenario for me, particularly in Dubai. Our kids might not haven't been in school for 5 months by the time they come back in September. You know, people perhaps doing a bleep test on day one, you know, to blast the cobwebs out.
Let's see how your fitness has gone down, you know, kind of thing. And I think Neil's touching on it as well, with something that he's going to be talking about, and that was, you know, are they physically ready to come in and do the things that you would expect them to do?
And that's important. Are they physically ready, and is it going to be a positive experience for them? Or like you said, they probably just want to come back and go for a good walk, or, you know, something with their friends where they can talk, and that's going to be really important to them as individuals and as people. And it's important we as PE teachers recognise that.
We found that it was very popular, and not necessarily for the reasons you think, walking sounds easy, but actually because of the social aspect. And so you get sort of friendship groups from different forms, then meeting up and deciding to do walking. And what we had to do with the walking is we wanted to do white lines. So we went not doing athletics this year. So we wanted to get our sort of ground staff to put white lines out, but they decided not to order the paint, knowing that we weren't going to be doing it. And now it's going to take 6 weeks to get it from any country. But what we did is we ended up marking cones out around on the field. So like 2 meter distance, so that they could walk one on one side of the cone, one on the other side of the cones, to keep them apart at least. But what we naturally found is that as people talk and walk, it's human nature. You just get closer and closer. So try and sort of space them out and have cones and even lines. I know it sounds really simple, but people just getting closer and closer. Next thing you know, they're trying to get almost shoulder to shoulder, and you happen to just go, space, please, space.
Sound a bit like a broken record as a PE teacher, walking around with a piece of rope that's 1.5 meters long or something. And the challenges, making it fun. They're power walking around to try and hit that 8,000 meter target in 40 minutes as a community, as a class, and as a collaborative group, because they've missed that, haven't they? One question I wanted to ask in the Netherlands: are they wearing masks in PE? Is there a difference between vigorous activity and non-vigorous for the masks?
No, there's no masks generally in public unless you want to wear them. They're a must on public transport, but that's it. You have to wear them on public transport. I don't know what it's like businesses in buildings, etc., but in schools it's not necessary. So we've not been hampered by that. Obviously, we don't have the same weather issues. As I said, having worked in the Middle East myself, knowing that if you're going back in August, September, it's still being 45 degrees or whatever. And if you were then hampered by not being able to teach inside, that would be pretty difficult. No, the only thing that kind of we thought as a team was that if they're wearing their PE kit all day, they're coming in and not changing. We obviously want to exercise them, but how sweaty do you want them to get and then have to sit in their PE kit all day, even no matter how much of a shortened day it is? So hence the options as well. I mean, the only thing is, hygiene-wise, at least you're 1.5 meters away from everybody else.
I think it's good that you're giving kids a choice and letting them take ownership, because some of them might come back super fit as well. They've just been, hitting the circuit sessions every other day during, their time away. So, that's something to consider too. You talked about them being in class and, away from their friendship groups, perhaps. Were they really excited to get back to PE? And I'm leading on to, what are the positives of a return to PE post, quarantine, and what have been the negatives as well?
Okay. Wasn't sure how they would feel. I know they were all, I've got 2 of my own children in the school as well, in the senior school, 1 in the primary. I know that they were buzzing to get back and see their friends. They could not wait to get back into school, whatever it looked like. They were desperate to get back in, and mine coped pretty well with learning at home, but they just couldn't wait. The social aspect of it was just huge. They couldn't wait to get back in. I think then once they'd done a couple of days in school and they were pretty much stuck in that room most of the day, by the time they came down to PE and came outside, it felt a little bit like prison rec. Like we were saying, this is not, you're allowed, this is your 1 hour of, outside time. I mean, it's now been reflected upon and it's changed slightly. And there's lunch times are now outside as well, because before they weren't. So there's some lunch times carefully sort of organized outside. So when they came outside with us, they couldn't wait to be outside. And then I know from other staff that when they'd come back from their first PE lesson and they were talking about the options and being outside and what they were doing, we had form tutors coming back and all the teachers that were on next lesson as well, and saying, year 8, we're absolutely buzzing, can't wait for PE next lesson. So I would say the vast majority of them, as in any school, the vast majority of them were really excited to get back into it, and I think just get moving.
And that's interesting. I spoke with a guy at Tanglin Trust School in Singapore, and he said the same thing. They just couldn't wait for PE, to just get out there and see their friends and mix and move, and they really missed it. What have been the negatives to it? I mean, I think it sounds like you've made, you've got lemons and made lemonade. You've made a really positive thing out of this, and lots of these kids are going to have a more positive attitude towards PE, like you've just said. They've really enjoyed it. What are the negatives in your eyes as a head of PE, either from a staff perspective, a student perspective? What are the things are the biggest obstacles and challenges?
And I know, talking with you guys earlier on, after school clubs and sport, it's non-existent. The local clubs are open, and we have a slightly different system to others, I suppose, in that there's lots of Dutch clubs, hockey clubs, football clubs, and lots of our students go to those, and they've started to open. But the approach from the school, and I totally understand it, is that there's no after school clubs on at the moment. So I think that the lack of that, and also then looking on to the start of next year and thinking what's happening with our tournaments and our conferences and those kind of things as well. When it comes to staff, I think the concern of staff about their own well-being, being around so many students as well. And again, when we were planning our activities, part of the planning was what is going to keep the students safe, distance, and what is also going to keep us safe. Because in many PE departments, you might have people who are living with or are high risk categories, as are considered high risk categories as well. So in our department, I mean, my eldest daughter has a heart condition, which is considered not high risk in one country, but high risk in another country, such as the dilemma about, what coronavirus is and what it does. So how do you keep yourself safe? How do you keep your staff safe at the same time and make them feel comfortable? And sometimes people haven't felt comfortable, and then we have to go through the processes and reflect on how we make them better for staff and for students. So it's constantly being mindful of how do we make our practice better and safer. We have a reasonable size PE office. We're not in there. It has no windows. Some PE teachers, we get stuck in offices with no windows in. We don't have any windows in there. So now we're in the cafeteria, for example. We're sat with a load of other staff in there as well, because it's no cafeteria allowed, no food. And so that's another hindrance. But I'd say the main one is just how do we keep people safe, and how do we keep people at least feeling safe as well.
No PE office. It's like the engine room. You got to have that, haven't you?
It's not a bad office. It just doesn't have outside windows, which is only maybe not that great, but
yeah. No, there's some, and I'm glad you've mentioned that, because PE. I can just imagine most PE teams are these people that are just like, yeah, I'll just crack on. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to put the kids first, etc. But as a department and leaders, we've really got to think, if you're not comfortable with this, we can go through it again, and we can add in extra layers or whatever, and that's, I'm really happy you've said that, because I think one of the first people that I've spoken to that have said that, and it's something I think about as well. So obviously you're in a situation where you've just got a few weeks left of the school year, and you've come back, and so therefore things like your jump rope 2 weeks on, but change it, works in perhaps a shorter period of time. What are you thinking long term? If you had a full term, have you thought about that yet, or are you waiting to see how the situation might change come August, September?
My thoughts, I've thought about it, I haven't really discussed it. Things are starting to ease up here. In the Netherlands, it was called an intelligent lockdown. So unlike, I know, because I still have family that are working in the Middle East as well, total lockdown of everything, not allowed outside for a period, certain periods of time, or even in the UK, you're allowed out for 1 hour of, exercise. Here, you were allowed out whenever you wanted to, as long as you kept space. So, and because numbers have gone down significantly here, things are starting to ease off. As I said, in clubs now, and it's slightly different rules to schools, but in clubs now, even some clubs like the rugby club, which we have a BSM rugby club, which is part of the school, but almost a separate entity. They're allowed now, rugby clubs are now allowed to do some contact. So the rules in schools and the rules of clubs are changing. Whether that then, and that's for under 18s, whether that then changes by the time we come back in, 2 months' time, will this now have eased off and come into school, and in which case we can run our normal curriculum, or more like a normal curriculum program, until we kind of sit waiting with bated breath to hear from the Prime Minister, Mr. Rutte, to see what he says, and then how we make plans from that. So I don't want to make solid plans right now. I'm reviewing the curriculum ready for next year, looking at what we're doing, and the idea would be to hit that as normal. And unless things, people are concerned obviously about second waves, things starting to ease down and the second waves coming back in. But yeah, as a team, I know that we'll cope with it, and we'll decide at the time. So
brilliant, good. Right, so just to sort of bring this to a bit of a close here, what are your top tips, your words of wisdom, pieces of advice that you would give someone like me going back to school in September, or anyone else in the world who's returning to PE? What would you advise them?
Just make sure you gather as much information as you possibly can. And I think webinars like this one, I think are a brilliant starting point. You know, I was looking to, as I said to my friend in the UK about his advice of best practice, and he's grabbing all of that best practice. I would then also say make sure you're sharing internally with the schools in and around your area, you know, ideas of collaboration, and then trusting your team and the creativity that you have in your team to come up and plan. And then once you select those, how do you carefully work through the protocols of what's going to be the safest thing for your staff and for your students? It's just plan. And then there is a bit like, you know, when the school opens again, and with all the best plans in the world, there is an element of trial and error, that suck it and see kind of, oh, that didn't work. You know, how do we adjust it? And thinking on your feet. So just, you know, plan as much as you can. They will not all work. And then the trial and error, and how do you sit as a team, and then reflect and improve and change. That would be my advice, really.
That's that cycle of try it, see what happens, talk about it, tweak, do it again.
Absolutely.
And yeah, a lot of others have said that you're going to get it wrong. Don't worry about it. It's going to go wrong. We're going to sort it, and it's got to be a team. It can't just be one person making all the calls.
100%. Yeah, my team have been excellent, and the different ideas they've come up with, especially with the health and well-being stuff as well. So yeah, really reliant on them. It's been great.
I hope they watch this, Chris, because you've praised them many a time, and
yeah,
you should hear it. Chris, thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to hearing from you at the webinar.
Cheers, Ed. Thank you so much.